Our number is the 528 billion we spend on mistakes.
Yeah.
We want to get that to zero.
Yeah.
That's our goal, is to get that to zero, get efficient. And then once we've mastered that, take that learnings and then build a better world from that.
Thanks for tuning in to the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. Let's go make healthcare better together. So I'm here with Chris Grilli of RxMapper, which I've been very excited for this for a while since we got introduced. We've had some virtual calls, seen you at some events, and now we get to actually highlight you on the show. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Big fan, longtime listener.
Okay.
So really excited.
First time guest,
longtime listener.
Yeah.
So really big fan of the show. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. And this is really, really novel and unique, and I can't wait to fully unpack what RxMapper is doing. But for the folks that have not heard of you so far, let's give them like the 30-second elevator pitch of what you do.
Yeah, so RxMapper was developed in collaboration with Mayo Clinic in the basement to take a patient's DNA and try to identify what the best medicine to take is. And we've gotten really good at doing that.
Okay. So trying to identify what the best medicine to take, a precision element of medicine rather than, hey, I think you should try this. And we have a couple different drugs we try until hopefully we eventually land on the right one. Right?
Yeah. So we're trying to evolve beyond kind of that guess and check, right? So typically the way a medicine is selected, not always, but typically, medicine, so you present, you have a condition, there's several agents you can choose from. The one that has the best kind of population data around it is typically the one that's chosen first. You give it to the patient, you observe how they respond. If they have a good response, great, they stay on it. If they don't, we select another one. For a good percentage of the population, you end up having to select 2 or 3 or 4 more drugs. And what we found is using your DNA, using your unique DNA signature, we can more efficiently identify it the first time with that. And that was really exciting. I mean, when we started seeing that kind of predictive power to be able to identify the correct therapeutic sooner. And then it's had all sorts of positive ripples.
Well, and it's obvious utility, right? It's the precision element of it is, one, do you get the right drug in the right person's body, right? Yeah. And are they going to respond most optimally to that drug? And then in my world too, there's the financing element to this. If we're doing all this trial and error on some very expensive drugs, set aside the potential for side effects, the cost of some of these drugs as well, where you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall trying to figure out what works, you eliminate some of the financial risk as well.
And we've known for a long time that we've been inefficient in the way we use therapeutics. In fact, there's a lot of data out there. It's estimated we spend about $528 billion a year fixing the mistakes we make with medicines, right? So
$528 billion?
Just fixing the mistakes we make with medicines. And so there's some data out there that suggests we spend about 460 to 480 billion on the drugs themselves.
Okay.
Right. And so we're spending more money in the inefficient care that we're providing. And so we started with the simple premise: can DNA impact that? And we're happy to report, we can.
Well, cool. And I want to hear the genesis of it, but I think we should address this up front because I have featured the notion of genomics/genetics on the show before. And so some of the listeners may be familiar with that term and have listened to that episode. Let's delineate what you're doing versus that methodology.
Yeah. So where pharmacogenomics may focus on maybe a particular disease or a couple of diseases, looking at narrow panels and maybe a handful of variants, we're collecting almost 36 million data points per patient. So we are looking at a huge amount of information, and we're using very powerful computation and very powerful algorithms to identify insights. How does that translate? So basically, where pharmacogenomics might 3 or 4% of the time identify a meaningful recommendation, our data is showing that almost 90% of the time, if you follow our process, we are making a meaningful recommendation.
Is that because you're collecting so much more data on a single individual, or why do you think your accuracy level is so much higher?
That's exactly it, right? So as you collect more information and can look at more variants, the probability that you have something useful to talk about goes way up. We've also worked really hard to get better screening criteria so that we're getting folks up front. So if we don't think we can help you, we're gonna be upfront about that. But if we do help you, we're very much gonna do everything we can to get you on the right therapeutic.
coffee, Chris, you helped me distinguish between genetics and genomics. And I thought that the way you described it was really crucial to my understanding of what you do. So could you go ahead and recap how to think about those two things?
Absolutely. So genetics is the study of kind of inheritable traits, right? So mom and dad pass genetics onto you, and
so my short height is an
short
example.
height, if that's something your parents gave you, you know, or eye color, or hair color, but there are diseases as well that parents can pass on, and all of that. And so our genetics colleagues do amazing work, right? They're incredibly talented, and it's done a lot of you know, it's made a lot of good in the world. We're a little bit different because we're studying your DNA as is, right? We're not studying the inheritable traits. We're just studying all the variation, the things that make you unique. And so there's a lot more of that information, right? It's just kind of how, you know, when you got your genetic information from mom and your genetic information from dad, and it kind of melded together, it created your genome. And that's what we are just passionate about. We just want to find everything there is to know about that. And that's why we're looking at so many data points as well with that. So that's really the big difference, right? Genetics is very important, typically deals with genealogy, heredity, all of that. Genomics is really focused on what makes you, and how the unique variation inside of your genome impacts all sorts of things, right?
How you respond to food, allergies you have, susceptibility to diseases, et cetera.
Exactly.
I would like to go back in time, not even to before the genesis of RxMapper, to the technology that even made RxMapper possible in the first place. And I know you probably know some of this history. So could you give us an idea of like the idea of genomic sequencing and all that stuff? Like when did that stuff happen, and how did that shape the possibility of this technology?
Yeah, so the first thing we had to do for this to be possible, there was a huge project, the Human Genome Project, which completed really at the beginning of the decade, so around 2000, 2001. Don't quote me, I haven't actually looked up the exact date, but it was on or around that time. And that gave us our very first reference genome, right? And so now we had something that we could compare everyone else to. And if it wasn't the same, now we know there's a difference. And so that allowed us to ask the next question, which is, what does that difference mean, right? And so that kind of launched this whole industry, this whole field, right? And that was really powerful. And then a couple of key advancements in the way we collected that information, right? So it took, I want to say something like 30 years and untold hundreds of millions of dollars to complete the first genome. Well, that's not sustainable for an individual. And so from that point till now, we've seen just this renaissance of advancements in next generation sequencing and our ability to drive the price down, and the biochemistry and chemistry around how we sequence. And what it's allowed us to do is actually get sequencing to a price point where we can offer services like RxMapper, and it's providing like 10x value versus all of it just getting absorbed in the sequencing cost.
Okay. And then your specific background too, prior to RxMapper, your educational history, work history, stuff. Give us a brief recap.
So classically trained as a pharmacist, right? Always had an interest in biochemistry, genetics, genomics, et cetera. Went on to work a couple of years kind of in community retail, as many of my colleagues do. But I had the good fortune of working on kind of advanced programs while I was in community retail. I made a transition to Mayo Clinic, and it's, part of my negotiation at the time was, I'd love to be part of the pharmacogenomics task force at Mayo. It was early days. And so I had the good fortune of being selected for that task force, getting really involved with the Center for Individualized Medicine. 10 years later, I now work with the polygenic risk score team at Mayo through the Center for Individualized Medicine, focusing on how we can use complex algorithms with loads of data, loads of DNA data for better patient outcomes.
Yeah.
Chronic health issues, surprise out-of-network medical bills, inflated medical and prescription drug prices. These issues cost self-insured employers hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Add to this the rising cost of care and potential for waste across the life of a claim, and it's clear that self-insured employers need innovative solutions that lower their health plan spend. At Valence, we've done just that, developed innovation that shifts the current paradigm. A complete and integrated ecosystem solution driven by data, one that manages and simplifies the complexity of medical claim costs. It is through analyzing millions of data points that we enable employers to realize and fuel cost-saving solutions. Valence experts come prepared from day one, targeting the fraction of claims that will drive the majority of health plan costs. That is how our team lives the Valence promise, engaging early and often for smarter, better, faster healthcare.
And I imagine, and we'll get into probably the relevancy of AI here, but the computational power and the ability to do these things at scale, at speed, and lower the cost over time, I'm sure has enabled the proliferation, if you will, of RxMapper and enabled you to go to market and things like that. You mentioned some over coffee. I don't want to miss, though, as a pharmacist, you found yourself getting frustrated, sometimes realizing you were prescribing drugs, right, to people that may not work. And having that own epiphany for you, I think, shaped your future.
Yeah, it was really tough, right? Like, you know, I'm a math guy, so I play probabilities, right? And, you know, when you have a medicine, you know it's not going to work in 100% of people. And so when you're handing a medicine with a serious side effect for an important condition, sometimes you hand them a poison, right? You hand them something that isn't going to be beneficial for them. And there was no way of knowing whether or not it is or it isn't. We have to just take it and observe. And that does a couple of things when you get it wrong, right? It kind of erodes the trust in your care team. It obviously causes harm to the patient, which nobody wants. And we don't solve the problem. We still have to deal with the actual underlying condition. And so that really compelled me to find a better way. Like, can we study, you know, genetics and genomics, and will that allow us to better dose and select medicines? And I mean, at this point, the answer is unequivocally yes. If anybody's paying attention to the literature and the outcomes data. But what's really kind of gratifying is, you know, as a pharmacist, right, we are meaningfully contributing to getting folks on the right therapeutic early and often. And that's really gratifying. That's super awesome.
Well, and the right therapeutic sometimes can be within a category where there's multiple drugs that might work, but the right one means, one, does it actually work for you, you specifically as an individual? And there's also a cost element to this, which I'm sure we'll get into later, which is how we can impact future risk on health plans or for individuals, their actual costs. Because I would imagine the precision of getting the right drug at the first time saves significant amounts of money over time as well.
Oh, our data shows it's north of about $8,600 just on drug cost, and could be as high as $12,000 on medical cost.
Okay.
Per patient.
Per patient.
Yeah. So it's really, I mean, and we've known this for a while, right? Like there's it's funny when you go to pharmacy school, you have to learn all the drugs, right? So even before you get into pharmacy, at least my pharmacy program, they handed us this big thick book and said, here's the top 200 drugs. Before you show up on day one, you need to know these drugs, right? And so you're studying over the summer before pharmacy school, and it starts kind of this process of learning all the different therapeutics that are out there. And so you very quickly realize that there's a lot of effective therapies out there. It's just, who are they effective for? And we never really had a good way of determining who they were until genomic guided insights, right? Until RxMapper kind of came along. And now we've got this really useful tool that allows us to determine which medicine is right for folks much earlier than kind of the take, observe model.
Yeah, I'm envisioning, rather than like holding a handgun and squinting at a target, adding a scope to the gun or adding a scope to the rifle in order to add some of that precision.
That's the idea.
You know, because that's where you guys come in. But the actual inception of RxMapper. So you gave us our history up to that point, but what was the actual business itself? How did that start?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So my personal health journey kind of led us there. So it's actually my family's personal health journey. So I was working at Mayo, and I had gotten a text message from my dad saying that my grandmother was going in for a routine procedure, no big deal. And, it was something that we just didn't think anything of it. Put my cell phone in my pocket and just went to work, right? I get done with my patient cases and my workups, et cetera. I look at my phone and I had like 10 missed calls. And I'm like, this is not correct. I pick up the phone and I call my dad, and my dad's like, there's been a complication in your grandmother's surgery. She had a bleed and did not make it.
Oh my God.
Did not make it. And through investigation and discussion after that, we determined that it was a preventable adverse drug event.
Really?
with it. And that really was the impetus to get me focused.
Okay.
So we started working real hard.
In what way was it preventable? Just so I can ask.
So my family carries a genetic mutation that increases our likelihood for bleeding.
Okay.
So my whole and I apologize in advance to my kids, but we've all been sequenced, and we've done a lot of analysis on that. But we were able to determine that we carry a couple actually mutations that, in the presence of certain medicines, we are at an increased likelihood for bleeding. And that is exactly what happened during this procedure. And if that information had been available to that care team at that time, they would have taken additional precautions, right? And we all, I mean, as healthcare professionals, we all know what those precautions are, but they didn't know one way or the other whether or not that was the way that it should have gone. And it's not their fault, right? They just didn't have the best available science and technology at their fingertips. And so I went to my eventual co-founder, David, and was like, how do we figure this out? How do we get this into that health system in upstate New York so that this doesn't happen again? And so from there, launched the framework of RxMapper.
Okay. I mean, that's fascinating, man. And so what was the actual research and development time frame? Because I know this has been a decades long process, right?
So it's been about a
And so how come it's taken so long for that to be the case?
Partially because we want to make a positive difference, and we're gonna follow the data, right? So there's a lot of folks that kind of raced into the market and said, planted their flag on the hill and said, this is what we do. We took a different approach. We said, let's prove what we do. Let's prove where we need to go. And let's bring data to the equation so that we can confidently look someone across the table and say, if you follow this program, these are the outcomes that we would expect you to see with that. And so that took a while. That took us years to actually amass enough data, interpret the data, get our endpoints correct. With that, we literally talked to everybody in the industry to find out what their needs were. What are your clients saying? What are your members saying? What are your patients saying? We took all of this, and it eventually grew into the platform you see today.
Okay. And then what sort of peer review or outside scrutiny comes into the equation once you're going through proving your thesis? How do you get that validated?
So we've been validated in a number of ways. We actually do not control the therapy, so we're working with the care team. So there's one validation.
Okay.
Right there. Everything we do is evidence-based, peer-reviewed. So we're not making a recommendation. So one of the things in the early days of genomics is people would extrapolate, right? So they would observe, say, SSRIs. They would observe a genetic variant with an observable trait or phenotype in an SSRI, and then they would extrapolate it to all the other SSRIs. We do not do that, right? So if we make a recommendation, it's going to be evidence-based, peer-reviewed for that drug and that drug alone. And so if you are not taking that drug, we are not extrapolating it to another drug that you are taking.
Okay.
And so we've got a lot of clinical checks. At this point, we have our CPC, a clinical practice committee that peer reviews all of the evidence and the data, and then we're publishing pretty robustly with that as well.
Well, and so let's talk about the actual testing process, because I want to do that. I also want to talk the application at the employer level, like how you guys actually impact plan sponsors. But the actual sequencing in and of itself, how does it come to be? Who do you target in order to do these things? Give me some brass tacks.
Yeah, so we're our main target is anyone struggling on their medicines, right? So if you have a side effect that you don't think should be happening, or you have you think the drug should be doing something and it's not doing what it's supposed to, that's who we need to talk to, right? And then from there, where we might, depending upon what data feeds are available to us, we might be able to go in and prompt folks, being like, hey, you're on a medication, you have a condition. Genomics has been shown to be very helpful. How you doing? How you feeling? You think everything's working with that? And so we're able to target some folks as well. So we do both. We'll have a general campaign typically that kind of invites everyone to reach out, and we'll screen them. If they meet criteria, we can advance them. If they don't, we'll help them, right? Just as a pharmacist would.
Yeah.
And then we'll also target certain folks through our ability to identify based on claims data and all that.
So I was going to ask you that. What kinds of type of claims data do you need?
So we can work either with PBM claims data, TPA claims data, anything that gives us kind of a forward-leaning insight into medical conditions, medicines that they're taking, et cetera. We've got great partnerships with a lot of folks, and so we've learned how to use this information to target where DNA could impact people the most.
And I assume this is a swab, right?
You assume correctly.
Okay, so
there's two ways we can collect your DNA: a spit kit or a swab with that. And so depending upon, sequencing availability and how quickly we need to get the program up and running, we might use either one with that. I like the swab, but the spit kit's just as effective.
And that's just you spit in a little tube, right? And then mail it to somebody.
Just mail it,
take that. There's always something weird about that, but I understand weird. That's how it works. Yeah. But it's also super not intrusive. It's not invasive. It's not painful, right? And so oftentimes there's some things that you could do for yourself that would be helpful, but the fear of, is it going to hurt? Is it going to be uncomfortable? You don't have that friction point.
No needles. We're not biopsying anything. You don't have to donate any specimens or anything. I mean,
you don't have to poop in a box, right?
Please do not. Please do not.
You could, just in case you needed that.
That's a different company.
So once somebody does that, you get your hands on the sample. Then what happens?
All right, so we take it through. So we got the sample. It goes to our sequencing lab. And then we do a very special sequencing process that we developed over 2 years to get essentially 36 million data points generated on average with that. And that's a really powerful
Is there something to that number? You said 36 million a few times. Is that all of the genes that can be sequenced, or
all of the known usable genes at this time? Okay. So it's and I mean it ranges between 38 to 35.
I'm sure it's a round number. But it's just to me, a complete novice, that sounds like a lot.
It is a lot.
Okay,
it is a lot. And that's it's one of the things that makes us very unique, right? Is we didn't just stop at what are called monogenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to collect all the information so as we got better understanding of the interplay of genetics, right, or of genomics, right? So it became pretty clear almost 8 or 9 years ago that a single gene, although in some cases is powerful, it's really the combination of variants and genes that actually is really predictive. And so we wanted to be that for folks. We wanted to say, okay, let's look at everything and use the best available computation and algorithms and science to do that.
Pareto Health is the largest benefits captive in the United States. With nearly 3,000 captive members, $1.3 billion of stop-loss premium in force, and almost 1 million covered lives, no other benefits captive comes close to Pareto Health's scale. But it's not just about the numbers. Pareto Health is a mission-driven organization, and that mission has 2 distinct parts. Number 1, to make self-insurance simple and more accessible for small to mid-sized employers. And number 2, to arm them with the most powerful cost management tools on the market. So if you're an employer frustrated with your healthcare outcomes, or you're a benefits consultant looking for an alternative to the status quo, it's time to consider Pareto Health. Pareto Health, where employers come to do self-insurance right, to do it easily, and to do it at scale. All right, so once the analysis comes out, you've got the sample, you've done the sequencing, boom, got a data set. What is this telling you?
Yeah, so we then take other data points. So we take other clinical information and we marry that to the genomics. And then we start to mold it into something useful for you, right? And so based on your condition, your medicines, your genomics, is there anything that actually flags, right? And that's what we want, right? We want this to be useful for you, right? We don't want to waste your time or give you something that's maybe interesting but not helpful, right? We're really trying to be helpful with that. And so we do a lot of work to collect a bunch of information to make sure that there is in fact a confirmed side effect, a confirmed either ineffective medicine, and then we marry that with genomics, and then the genomics tells us they'll either confirm, right? So if it's a side effect, we'll look for confirmation that we predict, and almost many times it confirms it, and then we'll use the genetics to find the next best therapeutic, and then we'll start to engage the care team with that.
Okay, and so you get the information you need. You've got a red flag of some sort that says an intervention is necessary. you go into the provider and saying, this is what we found and what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll do two things actually. So first we'll return the results to the patient themselves so that they understand kind of how this is working and how this works for them. Then we'll reach out to the care team and we'll say, hey, this is what we've discovered. Here's the evidence-based reasoning behind that. Give us a call if you need to, right? We want to make sure that care team is in the information loop. And then the combination of that will actually be stored in your portal, my.rxmapper.com. So that'll actually be stored in your patient portal. And, from that point, it's just a matter of following up and, kind of just managing the operation of care.
So let's talk about a specific use case then, because I think to make it really crystallize in people's minds, a specific condition, specific drug, something of that nature so people can wrap their heads around it.
Yeah. I mean, the classic one I present to anybody who's interested is rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
Right. In the beginning, it's a fairly cost-effective condition to treat, but can escalate very quickly if you are having poor outcomes with the therapeutics. And so we actually had a patient who was on methotrexate. Right? Okay. Standard first-line therapy for that condition. It's a great agent for most people, but for this particular person, the their genomics was not there, right? And so we immediately confirmed that after we sequenced them, we immediately confirmed that methotrexate was not a good agent for them. But there's no way of us knowing unless we had the data on board. But what was interesting was they had gone through their standard prior auth step therapy process and were immediately escalated to adalimumab or generic Humira.
Okay.
Right? A very expensive medicine. Mm-hmm. And we assessed that medicine, and there were actually two genetic variants that suggested poor response, so decreased efficacy, and then increased likelihood for side effects. Right? So they weren't going to tolerate it and they weren't going to get any benefit from it, and they were spending a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the current cost of Humira is. I think it might have come down some, but we would regularly see it in the $80,000 to $100,000 range or more, right? And then how many people on a plan are taking it, and then is it of questionable or limited efficacy as well? And then does it cause side effects that now need to be treated, or are there medical complications? It's a cascade effect that's potentially
if you get it wrong, right? So you're on this $80,000 drug, solving nothing and causing all of this additional care because it's making them feel worse. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. To show you the power of genomics, right? While all this is going on, so now we've confirmed two therapeutics are not right for this patient. A third therapeutic flagged, leflunomide, right, which is typically skipped over. Like, not a lot of people get put on this therapeutic. It was identified as maybe a strong suggestion of a good therapy. We work with the care team, we get them switched over, and lo and behold, we see response.
No kidding.
Drug costs a couple $100.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably saved a significant amount of money, and I do want to inch our way towards that. But that's what we're really talking about is get the right drug in the right hands for the right person. But also there's an at-scale impact of this, which is the cost savings to a plan, right? Yes. And so now we've talked about an individual use case with an individual, but for really to see, I think, a material aggregate impact in healthcare, it has to go through the employer chassis, right, or the employer channel.
It does.
So talk to me about the process of identifying partners, you working with consultants to get to the right plan in order to make it.
So we view our broker, consultant, producer relationships as some of the most important partnerships that we have. Like we will work almost exclusively with brokers, consultants, and producers. If a third party or a vendor comes to us, another point solution, we're going to ask for them to include kind of the broker consultant groups, because we think it's really important. The relationships are there, the investment that they, in their clients, and really just kind of understanding like what matters and what's important. That is important to us, and our partnerships with that group really helps us kind of accelerate that. So that's where we start, right? So we will start with the broker, and from there they guide us, right? So this client's really concerned about this, or this client's really concerned about that, and we then just kind of build a program around those for the client, and we start to solve the previously unsolvable problem of how do we manage this kind of out of control drug spend? Well, just get people on drugs that work at lower price points.
Do they need to be self-funded, or could they be fully insured potentially as well?
So self-funded is our preference, right?
Yeah.
But we do have fully funded, fully level, all of those. We'll reach out to us. Let's make the assessment. Once you get to like really tiny clients, we like to kind of aggregate them.
Sure.
Ideally, through a captive.
I was going to write a captive.
Ideally, we like to aggregate them through a captive with that, so that we can kind of spread out the risk. Because we will help you eventually, but if you've got 20 folks on your plan, it might take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
For that to happen.
Well, that actually gets me to my next question. So let's look at a sample size of a population. Let's say it's 1,000 lives as an example. Of that 1,000, how many do you think you're impacting out of that pool? Is it a limited number? Is it a large number?
Yeah, so about 3 to 5% of that pool, and then maybe half of them will actually result in an extensive workup, right? Where we're going to have to do something significant for them, for the patient with that. So we're talking really small numbers of folks, generally speaking, and these folks, our data shows they're north of 50 to 65% of total drug spend, and then when you include kind of inefficient medical claims, it just keeps going up from there.
Yeah, I've seen stats that suggest like 1% of a population drives at least 25% of the actual claim
1.3.
Yeah, there you go. So the specific number, right? So that obviously it confirms my suspicion. And so even if it's only 3 to 5% of a population, out of 1,000 people, that's 30 to 50 people. Yeah. You're impacting 15 to 25 of those, and you're probably impacting it to the tunes of maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially.
On 1,000, it could get north of $1 million.
Really?
Yeah, depending upon the conditions, right? So that's why the smaller companies are a little more variable. Sure. But 1,000 employee client, like we could be impacting a substantial amount, especially if they have a high average spend in the beginning, right? Okay. So and we're going to monitor all that. So that's one of the things we do before we even make a suggestion of moving forward. We're going to do a pop analysis to kind of see where we should target to maximize the program with that. And then we provide that to the broker. And then in partnership, we go to the client and say, okay, this is where we suggest you start.
Okay. And then they say yes, then
yes.
What is the outreach process like? Are you proactively outreaching, or is the employer introducing you to the employees that you impact?
So we're doing all sorts of things, right? So the best way that, the best way that this can get rolled out is in a partnership with the employer, right? So we partner with the employer, and then we do general marketing, typically email, print, text, phone, however the client is comfortable with that. Then we do targeted marketing, but then all the while we're doing, we actually just did our first YouTube live stream. Cool. With that. So that was super fun. Yeah, that was super fun. And so we're out there just trying to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the goal, right? The goal is to say, hey, this technology is super powerful. It's available to you. And we want to be that trusted partner in your healthcare journey that helps you navigate this with that. And so we get that messaging out there through all sorts of modalities.
Yeah. And do you have any reticence or people resisting the idea of doing this for some reason? Are there common objections why an individual would say, I'm not so sure this is for me?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And this is completely voluntary.
Yeah.
And really, Spencer, my sincerest wish is that somebody can actually have that choice. Right. Because a lot of our patients, they're struggling so mightily with their medicines. They're willing to do virtually anything with that. And so if you're in that point where it's like, oh, it's not right. It maybe we can help you. Maybe we can't. It's not right for us. That's a gift. Mm-hmm. So we actually are very, it brings a smile to my face when somebody's saying that, because it means that, maybe you are getting some benefit, or maybe you're not having such a severe side effect with that. But yeah, we absolutely get those questions all the time. And that's one of the reasons why I try to make myself as available as possible to a client in a rollout. And, we do the live stream events and stuff. So I can get out in front of some of the fears that people might have.
Well, yeah, like any novel technology, right? Initially, your main job is just convincing folks of the utility that it actually works and that you need to care about it.
Exactly.
Right? And then once you've overcome that initial threshold of resistance, then people go, oh, yeah, of course we use RxMapper or something to that effect. Because, obviously, could you imagine a life without this technology existing? But I think you're still in the phase of that, like persuading and convincing folks that this thing works.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I think our data is strong enough now. If you listen, we have a pretty compelling argument that this works, right? The data is showing it's working. Now it's just a matter of understanding and feeling comfortable. What do you do with my data, right? Well, we use it for two purposes: to provide you care and to improve the care that we provide you, right? We're not looking for siblings, or this is not a novelty product. Like, we are a clinical company looking to provide answers to the hardest to treat patients on any given population that we serve.
Well, could you envision the information that is like coming out from your efforts shaping future development of drugs?
I hope so.
Okay.
I mean, that is the goal, right?
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of inefficiency in the system now. I mean, I'm not saying anything we all don't either feel or know already with that. But yeah, eventually, if we can, get to a point where not only are we using the existing therapeutics, but we're designing and developing better therapeutics with that. So yeah, that is really, I think a lot of people are thinking very deeply about that kind of future state. But step one, let's get more efficient with what we got.
Yeah.
Right. So, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's take the therapeutics we've got. Let's use this amazing technology, and let's see how efficient we can use all the hard work that previous generations have put in developing these pharmacological compounds.
Yeah, and I can imagine folks that are listening are going, wait, is RxMapper replacing the PBM? Are they working with the PBM? Is there resistance from the PBM? So talk to me about that.
Absolutely. Are we replacing the PBM? No.
Yeah.
Are we working with the PBM? Absolutely. And they're some of our most trusted partners with that. And then what was the third one?
The third one is you're getting resistance from the PBM.
So almost never, right?
Okay.
So we actually feel, and you can ask our PBM partners, but we actually feel we enhance their product, right? So one of the things that we love to do is present with our PBM partners, right? And it's amazing because, we come in and we share the patient cases and the stories and, how we avoided, this really dangerous situation. And then they present how they maintain cost containment and how they got folks to the right, not only now the right therapeutic, but now the right, most cost-effective therapeutic. And the combination of the two, the quarterly business reviews that we do just take on a whole nother dynamic. And that's really fun to see.
Having spent years working alongside healthcare leaders, brokers, and employers, I know how overwhelming healthcare can feel for our customers. We've all been there. Those renewal conversations that never seem to get easier. Rising pharmacy costs and medical costs, and no real transparency into where healthcare dollars are going. That's why I'm excited about Nomi Health. They're not just fixing the old system. They've rebuilt self-funded benefits from the ground up. With Nomi's network, you can offer something truly different. No copays, no deductibles, zero out-of-pocket costs when members see a provider. It's the kind of benefit that makes everyone ask, why hasn't healthcare always worked this way? Ready to bring your clients something different? Visit nomihealth.com and see how Nomi is rebuilding healthcare, one employer and one community at a time. Yeah, and I can imagine, once you get over the initial resistance of any partner going, well, wait, are you trying to displace me, or are you taking some of our role out of the equation? And you go, no. I'm complementary, right? And I'll oftentimes, there's products out there in the kind of captive space that are, I kind of understand them, I'm not sure. And I always will go are you competitor or complementary? Which one are we? And they're usually like, we're a little more complementary than competitive. I'm like, okay, let's talk. But you don't, because it's so nascent, you just don't know just yet. And so it's that part of that convincing element. But it's pretty obvious how you would empower or supercharge the role of a PBM. And we talked over breakfast as well, the incentive structure. Shaping the right incentive structure is so crucial to this. Do we have the right incentive framework to set up to get people on the right medications for them, not necessarily the ones that might maximize rebates or something to that effect. You could really help the PBMs become even more transparent.
Yeah, and I don't think we disrupt the incentive program as much as if we start on the front end with efficacy, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure the drug is right, and then allow the back end to do what it does. I think we're going to get into a really interesting synergistic space, right? Like, because really the big thing is channeling someone without any knowledge of whether or not the therapeutic is going to work based on some sort of financial reason feels icky. Right. It's one of those things where it's like, oh man, are we really making the best decision for the care of that patient? And so if you bolt us on in front, the answer is always yes. right? So like once we've assessed efficacy, now we're getting them on the most cost-effective agent, and that's really where the paradigm shifts, because it's like, yeah, we are getting them on the right drug for them, and now we're getting them on the most cost-effective drug.
Well, and I'll be clear too. Sometimes the right drug for them is the expensive drug. Like, I don't want to suggest that just because a drug is expensive, it's the wrong drug, or some evil person is trying to extract money out of the equation. But we just want to know if that's the case and there's a super high price tag, it is the right drug.
So this is super interesting, right? So this has been theoretically kind of hovering around our concept for a really long time. And now we've got real world data starting to roll in. We have yet to increase cost. We have yet to make a recommendation to a more expensive drug. What we're finding is there's so much inefficiency. We're actually getting people on low-cost generics that are ineffective to low-cost generics that are effective, and then that's preventing the progression up into the more expensive drugs.
But I assume sometimes you are confirming, though, that the drug they're on that happens to be expensive might actually be the right one as well, right?
We will always do what's right for the patient, right? And so if the drug is working and it's the right drug, we're going to make that recommendation for them. So about 10% of the time we're therapeutically de-escalating. So you're on a really expensive medicine, and we therapeutically de-escalate you to a less expensive medicine that works. Right? We've never gone the other direction so far. It could happen, and we will make that recommendation if we need to, but it has yet to happen.
Well, I suspect one way it might happen, and tell me if I'm wrong, is in the event that somebody is a candidate for a gene therapy solution. Obviously, we know those are in the millions of dollars of price tags. Could you envision, and is this even part of the equation with you guys, where you would actually come into a situation where a gene therapy might be indicated in support or research whether or not that's appropriate? Okay.
Yeah, so we want to be your kind of trusted genomics partner, right? And so we want to be helping with, gene therapies. We want to be helping with, therapeutics that are essentially precision therapeutics designed based on, genetic insights, right? There's a lot of them coming out now where we're starting to learn about the biology of the genetic biology or the genomic biology, and then they're designing therapeutics around it. And so to use them correctly, you have to understand, do I match that study population? And so we want to be that trusted partner in that. And so if the therapy is right, we want people on the right therapy.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And on the subject of the right therapy, it's inescapable to have a conversation about pharmacy without GLP-1s being part of the equation, right? And you have a notebook here, but we were talking about GLP-1s before. What role would you play ensuring GLP-1 is right for this individual, and or what form of the GLP-1 is also correct?
So, obviously, as we were talking earlier, this is an area of intense focus because of the cost of the therapeutics, right? GLPs in diabetic patients, it's pretty well studied, right? And there are some insights that we can provide in that. But we are, as we start to think about genetics and genetic variation, here's what we know. We know that there is genetic variation that impact these agents because we've seen it in diabetes, right? Where everybody's really focused right now is weight gain, which is a relatively new indication for those therapeutics. And we're in the forefront of studying what that means and what variation actually translates into outcomes. And this is an area where you really want to be disciplined, right? Because everybody wants it so bad. And there's a temptation to say, yeah, we can help out with that, right? There's a temptation to say, oh yeah, we've got a product to do something with that. And it could mislead folks, or it could give bad information. And so we've taken the other approach to study it very intensively. And when we do have recommendations, they're going to be best in class recommendations. We're going to really guide people to the right therapeutics. The interesting thing, though, is where we spend most of our time, honestly, isn't even on the high end of the plan. It's in generics.
Really?
It's in 80% of our recommendations are small molecule generic recommendations, and it's slowing the progression to these really expensive agents like GLPs.
Well, that's something, obviously, that isn't necessarily tangible immediately in the data set, which is if you're not really looking at the low-cost drugs as being a problem on your plan. But your argument is some of these low-cost drugs are just the incorrect low-cost drug. There's a better low-cost drug, and what you're actually doing is staving off an expensive medication.
And it's funny, right? Because we actually do see this almost immediately. So what's interesting is we looked at this with one of our partners. So we compared the previous 2 quarters without RxMapper to the previous to the current quarters with RxMapper, and we saw in the without RxMapper group, we saw a 4% increase in specialty drugs, right? Super expensive medicines. Okay. We implement RxMapper for that for the same time period a year later, and we saw essentially a 15% reversal.
Okay.
So we stopped the growth and then we reversed it by 11%.
Yeah.
Statistically significant. So
Yeah.
95% probability that our intervention actually was the driving force between that reduction. That was in a very short period of time. And really what we're doing is, and if you think about it, right, everybody starts off on a generic, right? Very few plans, if I've ever seen one, is like, no, go straight to the specialty, right? You start off
There's
on
a
the
step therapy.
There's generally a step therapy. Like generally they say start off on a small, molecule generic. Hopefully it works. And then if it doesn't work, then we'll pay for the more expensive agent. All we're saying is before we jump over, there's 7 other drugs. Let's genomically assess them to see if any of them work. 90% of the time, we're finding that we can actually find a drug within the other therapeutics that would have been skipped over had we not done
Well, and
intervention.
this partially answers the question for employers that get frustrated with the rising costs of healthcare over time and medical trend, which is really medical and pharmacy trend, but we just shorthand medical trend.
Yeah.
We just assume that trend is going to continue, right? We've accepted that the cost of this is going to go up, and it's going to outpace inflation and all the other things. And you're actually pointing out the possibility of not just flattening RX trend, but reducing RX trend over time, which is astonishing, but I mean, it also seems obvious with the right intentionality and the right solution available, you could do that.
If we can get out in front of it, right? So if we can get to those folks before step therapy kicks in, or we accelerate too quickly through step therapy, and we can use smart genomic implementation, we can prevent folks from getting on really expensive, ineffective drugs.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get folks on. I mean, the thing is too, I'm not saying that the specialty drugs aren't effective. They actually are pretty effective, but there's these other drugs that, were developed in, the 90s and the 2000s that, we just skip over for whatever reason that might be equally or more effective. Right. And they're there for us to take advantage of. And we've got a technology that can guide us. So if you get into our process, meet our inclusion-exclusion criteria, 90% of the time, we're going to be guiding you to a DNA-guided recommendation, and 80% of those recommendations is keeping people on effective generics.
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
Do you guys stop, if I'm looking at this in a continuum, you're obviously looking at the genome and you're looking at its medicine's application on the genome. What about a step before that? Is the medicine even necessary at all? Is there another type of lifestyle intervention?
100%.
Okay.
So we screen everyone, right? So folks are coming in, we first have to confirm that the medicine is appropriate, so everybody gets screened, and we're not just doing genomics. We're going to do drug-drug interactions. We're going to do everything a pharmacist should be doing. We're going to be doing it's just enhanced with genomics.
Okay.
Right. But yeah, we are 100% making sure that everything is safe, effective, and appropriate all throughout the process.
But not necessarily downstream of food or lifestyle changes or things like that.
We'll absolutely talk to you about those if they're relevant.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so statins and grapefruit is the classic, right?
Tell me about that.
You shouldn't be eating grapefruits with statins, right? So we're going to assess all of that, right? If you're doing something or corticosteroids and needing a high-fat meal for absorption, right? We're going to talk to you about all of those dietary considerations, how they impact your medicines. We're gonna be that trusted therapeutic
Does it include
partner.
things like vitamin deficiencies as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, sometimes people might be experiencing a symptom because they're deficient in vitamin D, as an example, right? And something as simple as supplementing with a vitamin D or just getting some more sunlight.
Or scurvy with vitamin C. There's all sorts of things. So we're here to serve. We're here to take care of you. And that's really the amazing. We're using the best tools of the day. We've amassed, some of the best pharmacists of our generation, and we're trying to take care of folks in a way that I think we see the numbers. $528 billion of essentially inefficient care around therapeutics. Like, we can do a better job. And so we are just humbly submitting that this is a new way to do a better job.
I love it. Well, and then let's zoom up one level and then we'll go to healthcare to finish this up. But thinking about risk, you and I were talking about risk earlier, being in the captive space, things like lasers, large claims that impact trend and all those things. We were discussing that. And you have a thesis that you potentially could prevent or reduce the number of lasers or prolong the need for a laser on a plan. So let's talk about that.
I mean, to completely absolve a plan of lasers would be amazing, right? That would be a paradigm shift in the way we think about care. But I don't know if that's in fact where the goal is, but I do think that if we can get out in front of folks, not responding to therapeutics, get them on low cost, effective generics that manage these, significant conditions, we should be able to, prevent the really big, misadventures, right, in care, right? And that's what our data is showing, right? So by reducing the velocity of therapeutics into the top 10% of the plan, we're preventing a lot of folks from getting into these really expensive agents and not getting any benefit, and then really ballooning the cost.
Yeah, and then you look at our structure, there's other structures out there where lasering is not allowed, right? So then you start to go, well, how do I keep the controls down of premium?
Exactly.
Keep the profitability of a captive framework, as an example, whole. And not, since I cannot laser, then what is the alternative? Well, we need to go attack the spend, and you can do both of those simultaneously.
Yep.
But then you have the growth of the program, you have the profitability sustained, you have competitive, market pricing, all of it is shaped very, very well. And you knew I am conceptually aligned with you there. But that, just thinking about, there's those kind of multiple sides of this equation. There's the risk side, which is purely the financial component. There's the human side, which you guys are obviously impacting in outcomes, and that can be married together in a solution that's really actually impactful. And so how do you see this evolve, Chris, over time? Because you don't just stop and go, we made RxMapper. Cool.
Well, so we actually designed our process to be with you for the long haul.
Okay.
Right. So we want to be your trusted partner over the arc of your healthcare journey, right? So you get sequenced once, we digitize that information, we store it in our platform. As your therapies change, we encourage you to reach back out to us, have additional conversations. We want to get out in front of this as best we can. And it's a partnership, right? Like if you have a question about your medicines, we want to be the folks you ask, right? We want to be the folks that you trust to help navigate you and your care team to what the right therapeutic is.
And so once it's sequenced, it's sequenced. So you're going to have to go sequence again 5 years or 10 years, or would be the reason to do that?
Yeah. So for us, no. For what we do, no. God forbid you get a serious condition like cancer. There might be tumor sequencing and stuff that your oncologist might recommend, additional sequencing. But for what we do, one and done.
And now for the individual then, because this becomes a question of employee turnover and churn, where they might on average stay at an employer for 3 years. Let's say I do RxMapper and sequence at this employer.
Yeah.
Then 2 years later, I find myself elsewhere. Is it portable, this information for me? Okay.
So two things with that. One, it's portable and you can pay out of pocket. So you can cover the cost that your employer was covering for you and maintain your membership with RxMapper, or you can convince your new employer. That's our preference, right? So if you convince your new employer, then we would offer it to everyone and help all of your colleagues.
And is there an application in the kind of the more public spacing, like Medicare individuals, where you think you could? I mean, I'm certain the answer is yes, but
it's all data driven at this point. Yeah, the answer is very clearly yes.
Yeah, and for me, I'm always thinking about how does something like this get fully socialized, or
right.
not in like socialism, but like socialized across a population where it's accessible to as many people that need it as possible, right? And so how do we disentangle that from like a 1-to-1-to-1 setting to make it to the masses?
I mean, so when you think about so I shared the origin story of RxMapper. My grandma was on Medicare, right? So it's got to get there, right?
Yeah.
We've got to get there as a society. We've got to get there as a health system. Like, we have to use the best tools of our day to solve the real suffering that's going on around inefficient therapeutics. Because, I tout the $528 billion, right? But that's $528 billion worth of mistakes. That's $528 billion worth of patients that have had to get additional care, had to take additional time, had to have additional suffering that this takes a big chunk out of, right? And that's just what was reported.
Yeah.
Right. That's just the stuff that rose to the level of being measured. Like how much quiet burden is out there as well. And so we're rolling up our sleeves. Symbolically, they don't have sleeves on right now. We're rolling up our sleeves. We're leaning into the problem, and we're using the best tools and technology of our day to help solve it for our generation and future.
Well, so that dovetails nicely into kind of the end of the podcast that we usually do, which is healthcare in general. Like, let's separate, if you will, RxMapper somewhat from the discussion, but like, as you've seen over the last couple of decades, this thing that we call healthcare in the United States evolve. What are you envisioning the next few years are going to look like, whether that's political wins or whether that's innovation? Like, what are you most bullish on, all that stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm bullish on innovation. I think it's funny, right? I'm an optimist, right? But I think we live in such a cool time, right? I think sometimes we become a prisoner of the moment and we focus on the negative. But like, if we look at the advances that are happening all around us with AI and compute and cloud and, what we're doing in medicine and the kinds of technologies that we're starting to finally understand and grapple with, I'm incredibly optimistic that a lot of these challenges that we're facing today, we're going to be able to solve together with smart innovation, smart implementation. And so as it relates to us, where we want to be that trusted partner. In 5 years, we want to be that trusted partner for all of our brokers and their clients. And, I want to get to know, our patients' families and all of that. I mean, I really want us to be that solution people look to when they're struggling with their therapeutics and they feel the hopelessness of.
Well, if you feel like the emergence of this type of technology and others that like it seems to be happening at an accelerating rate, the developments, right?
It is.
Could you envision a world where disease might be eradicated altogether? Is that such a crazy idea in 2025 to think? I
would love for that. I mean, can I envision that world? I mean, it's a complicated problem, right? It's disease is tough. Right. But I mean, with the advent of, therapies, I mean, cancer is a great example, right? Like probably the single biggest investment we've made in healthcare in human history. And we're just now seeing the fruit of that investment. I mean, the therapeutics genetics and genomics is a big benefactor of cancer research and cancer therapies. And so, I don't know if anybody could have ever envisioned a cure for cancer, but there's really viable cures. Like there's, in many conditions they become chronic. And so who knows what the future holds, but I would love to eradicate disease.
I mean, it'd be awesome, right? And I know that's a pie in the sky, like hope, but we were talking earlier about the possibility of GLP-1s somewhat eradicating obesity. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily possible at a population level, but it certainly looks like, I think you said for the first time in how long average weight has gone down
in the United States. Yeah, it's reversed.
That's at least a sign of positivity, right? We don't know what all the other downstream impacts of that are, but it just on the very surface level, if people on average are weighing less than they did in years prior, that's a good thing.
And I think for us, I mean, our number is the $528 billion we spend on mistakes. Yeah. We want to get that to zero.
Yeah.
That's our goal, is to get that to zero, get efficient. And then once we've mastered that, take that learnings and then build a better world from that. Right. Yep. And so, for in the future, as close to zero as we can get that. And I don't think we'll ever get it to absolute zero, but if we can get it at least below the cost of therapeutics, that's a win.
I think AI and robots will eradicate us before we eradicate mistakes in healthcare.
I don't know. I'm an optimist about that. I'm not going to.
I'm 50-50 on it.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are 50-50 on it. I lean towards, I think they're going to enhance our lives.
I do too.
At least in the short term.
At least I try to be optimistic and think that's the case. So last question, usually ask for closing thoughts, Chris. Sure. Really, the floor is yours, what you want to leave us with, but give us a couple sentences of what you want the folks to think about.
Yeah. So if you have somebody who is struggling with their medicines or a client that's kind of struggling to control their therapeutic costs, we really want you to consider us as a novel, innovative option that's been clinically validated and now proven in the market to actually be a meaningful driver of not just financial change, but human change, right? Getting people on therapeutics that work. We don't have to quietly suffer alone. Yeah. Right. RxMapper is here to kind of be your trusted guide through that. And
my statement on top of that would be these solutions to a lot of the big healthcare problems exist We just need enough employers and individuals willing to lean in to seek them out, because a lot of them are already there today to solve these problems. So Chris, I really appreciate you coming down, man. I appreciate you made the trip for this, and obviously want to make this worth your while. So looking forward to releasing this one. Obviously, if we want in the future, when things evolve and continue to update and more publications and stuff come out, we'll do another version of this to get an update as well, man. But thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure.